different lengths on both sides? Or am I just sitting? I'm probably just sitting at an angle.
I think it's how you're sitting.
Imagine if that was how I realised that I'd had a terrible haircut. Anyway.
Hello, I am here with my friend Anna James, which means it is time for the Women's Prize for Fiction 2024. Woo! Very exciting. So if you've not watched our videos before, I know many of you are longtime viewers and actually had a nice encounter about a month ago in a bookshop where I was buying a book and another bookseller came up to me and said, "Hi, I just wanted to say I'm a fan of your videos, especially your videos with Anna."
Oh!
Yeah, so we have a fan club. So thank you, Waterstone's bookseller. But for those who have not watched our videos before, this is our predictions video for the Women's Prize for Fiction Longlist, and the Longlist, official Longlist, is always 16 books. So just as a fun way to make our guesses, we have each picked 16 books, which we have written down on cards, and we are going to reveal them one by one because we don't know what each other has written down. And then we'll discuss them and why we picked them, why we think they're likely choices, or that we hope they'll make the long list, and just have a fun bookish chat about them, because the official long list will be announced on March 5th, so not too long to wait, but yeah, it's always fun to guess. Yeah. It's really difficult to guess because it could be any novel written by a woman published in the past year, so the eligibility dates are the beginning of April 2023 to the end of March 2024. So that's the date range. And yeah, there are so many choices. We had really difficult
I think there's a lot of potential for it to be a really good year, though. When I was looking at the options, I think it could be a good year. My list, as per usual, is Eric's always read more books than me, full stop. More books are eligible. I must admit, I retreat further and further into backlist. Mine is a mix of kind of wish list, predictions, books I would like to read, books that are eligible that I think sound good. Yeah. It's sort of always a bit of a hybrid, isn't it, between predictions, wish list.
Mine are mostly books that I have, pretty much all actually books that I've read.
I think I've spent so many years tied to publication dates as a journalist that the further I get from journalism, the more I enjoy just being able to read completely divorced from pub dates.
That's fair enough, because yeah, you are very busy. And for those of you who haven't met Anna before, I should have said Anna is a author and journalist and podcaster.
Oh, yes.
So I'll put links to all of her details in the description below, so you can follow her and check her out and do all those fun things. But before we get into the fiction list, because it is not just about fiction this year, there is also the new Women's Prize for NonFiction, which the long list has been announced already. I made a video discussing all the books, and I'll put a link to that below as well, if you want to learn more about those books. But as a fun way to engage with the nonfiction book long list as well, which is also 16 books, so quite a lot of books.
Because we were thinking about how to, because we're not going to have the time. Well, you might. I not time even. You're just very efficient and committed reader, to read all 16 non-fiction books and all 16 long-listed novels. But we did want to sort of dip our toes.
Yeah.
So we've had a look at the long list, and we've both kind of picked out a couple of books that we're drawn to, that we're going to read at least one of. But then
also, as a fun way to pick more choices, I've made up a bag with all of the long list for the nonfiction on cards, and we are going to have a lucky dip and pick out a book which we will hopefully read before the winner is announced in the summer.
Yeah, to sort of wildcard it. So I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, actually there's 7. That's like half the list that I am drawn to, which are The Dictionary People, The Britannias, Vulture Capitalism, Shadows at Noon, Young Queens, Code Dependent, and Thunderclap.
Yeah.
That's the kind of half of the list that I'm drawn to. And I think if I was going to read one, I'm quite drawn to the Britannias.
Okay.
Which isn't my usual thing. I don't read a lot of nature writing, but I feel like I'm quite drawn to reading something that I don't really know anything about.
And I also hope to read Thunderclap soon because I've heard so many good things about it. It's also on the shortlist for the Writers' Prize for their nonfiction category, and and I also have a copy of it, and so I've been wanting to read it, but also Wifedom. I'm really keen on reading because I reread 1984 at the end of last year.
Right, here we go.
Shall we do the Lucky Dip? Yes.
I don't know whether I'd prefer to pick something that I want to read or make me read something outside of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
Okay. The Britannias.
Well, okay, that's unlucky.
Shall I pick another one?
Yes.
Because, that's the one I was already
If that was
read.
your top choice that you want to read already.
Yeah. Okay, and Intervals by Marianne Brooker. Which one is this? Is this the
it's a Fitzcarraldo publication. Yeah, and it's about a woman whose mother, the mother learns that she's terminally ill or seriously ill, and and it's following her over a decade as she adjusts her lifestyle to to live with that knowledge, but also as she becomes increasingly ill. Her daughter assists her in her dying. So it sounds quite serious, but it's meant to be like very moving. And
well, you know what? I think some of these, it's a bit like, have I got the emotional stability?
Yeah, and that's totally fair
to tackle some of these subjects.
That's
But I'm up for giving it a go, and the Britannias is what I was going to read anyway. So great. That's a good pair for me. Right, shall I hold it for you? There we go.
Sure, thank you. I should also say I've already read Doppelganger, so if I pick that, obviously I'll pick another one as well. So. Thunderclap, which was one that I was quite keen to read anyway. I think you need another one. Yeah. It's quite a coincidence. We both picked ones
the
that
one at the top of our list.
Keen to read. And the other one is Lifetime. The other one that I want to. Okay, I think, this is the flaw in this system.
Yeah, you pick one more, and then if it's another one you want to read, then the bag is telling you that you can just read what you want to read.
Yeah, I think it is. Okay. Oh, Shadows at Noon. Okay. Which, so this does sound fascinating, and
one
I think
I'm drawn to.
Yeah, one of the judges said it was like absolutely life-changing. Basically, like history of South Asian continent and of India and Bangladesh and Pakistan. But it is also, I think, like 860 pages long, totally so it's quite a tome.
A commitment. Because why I was drawn to this one as well was that it like brings in like a lot more kind of cultural and family references than these kind of histories often do,
of the history of this region,
which I like a lot. That is
a
commitment.
So
this is the problem.
We'll see how much time I have.
But like this is the thing with nonfiction; they often are chunky, and also I don't know. Certainly, my brain reads differently when I'm reading nonfiction. Even if a nonfiction book is like spectacularly good, I never quite hit that like almost flow state that I can with a novel that is really good, and you just kind of keep going through it even if it's long, whereas nonfiction requires a level of like it's just a different type of reading. Well, that's a selection
so
for us to start from and have a look, but we'll report back in the next video what we've read.
What we've read and how we feel about it. But I'd love to know too what you're most interested to read from the nonfiction list and what you want to prioritize. And also with the fiction choices, what you think about our fiction choices. And if you have alternative suggestions you want to make and that you are hoping or expecting to see longlisted for the fiction prize, then please let us know about that in the comments below.
I'm excited.
Shall we? Yeah, I'm very excited to see what Anna's picked and how many we have in common. Do you want to start off with your first fiction choice?
I reckon there's 3 that I reckon we'll definitely have in common.
Ooh, okay.
Famous last words. Right, my first one is actually a bit of not a wild card, but like not one. Anyway, it's Headshot by Rita Bullwinkle.
I've not heard of this.
Which is, I think, just about to come out. I can't even remember. I saw somebody talk about it on Instagram, and I thought it sounded really interesting. It's not my usual thing. It's about a group of American girls who are like doing some sort of, can you tell I don't do combat sport? Boxing or something like that. But it just sounds like a really interesting, like different kind of more experimental girls and sport. I think it sounds really good.
Okay. My first choice is Clear by Carys Davies.
Oh, no, I haven't picked that.
It's quite a short novel. I am about halfway through reading it now because it's a very cutesy thing, but I'm reading it aloud to my husband. Every once in a while I'll read aloud to him a book in its entirety, especially if it's a shorter book. This is, I think only like between 150 and 200 pages. So it's set on a Scottish island in the 1840s, and about a man who travels to this island to inform one of the long-term inhabitants of this island that he needs to vacate it, that the land is being repossessed sort of for farming purposes. And but Carys Davies just has this wonderful way of writing that just draws you into the story. I've only read her novel West before, which again is quite a short novel, but I just really admire writers that can write in such a compressed way that's really powerful and clear and immediately makes you feel into the story.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'd started reading aloud to my husband another novel, and we were just like, oh, I'm not really feeling this vibe. Shall we try this other one? And like instantly we were both into this book and wanted to know more.
Amazing.
But also it was really atmospheric and wonderfully written.
Is it, so one thing we sometimes wrangle with the shorter books is there is a word count lower limit for this prize, which I think is it 30,000 words? So like Assembly by Natasha Brown wasn't long enough. Weather by Jennie just was long enough. And I must admit, this is probably a good point to just do my cheat one, because I think I haven't included this in my 16. This is a total cheat, but I do think Orbital by Samantha Harvey has a good shot. But I don't. It's like 140 pages, but I just don't know, and I can't waste a pick on something that I'm not 100% sure is eligible. This is my bonus pick if it's long enough, but it's
and I do really want to read that novel. I've not picked that just to spoil, but yeah, that's one I've been really wanting to read just because the subject matter is
totally...
our
joint cheat one then.
Yeah.
Okay, my next choice is The Wren by Anne Enright, which is the first of my three that I think will have the same.
Okay, yeah. There we go.
Yay!
That was my next pick.
Which I haven't read, but it's about, it's Anne Enright. It's about an Irish family.
Yeah, a mother.
A sad Irish family, but it's also funny, right? That's...
Yeah. It has a great sense of humor to it, but is also really moving. And so there's an adult young woman who's trying to find her way in the world. She's just fallen in love with somebody who might not be Mr. Right, but she works as a travel writer, though she doesn't actually travel many places, so which is one of the comic things about it, that she's writing about all these far off places that she's not actually gone to. And the narrative moves back and forth between her and her mother, who has very strong opinions and is also very charismatic, but it's also about the young woman's grandfather, her mother's father, who was a famous poet, and interspersed between their sections about them are poems that he wrote because he was a famous poet. And,
I like that.
And it's so fascinating how that poetry interplays with the larger narrative of the story and what you personally know about these characters and what the grandfather was trying to project as his image as a famous poet. And it's all very clever and fun. And and she's just a masterful writer.
Okay, great.
One
match.
Pick.
So that means it's back to you.
Okay. My next pick is The List of Suspicious Things by Jennie Godfrey, which I only just read about a week ago and only was just published last week, actually. Is a novel set in 1979 in Yorkshire, and follows an adolescent girl who decides to go on the hunt for the Yorkshire Ripper, and together with her best friend, makes a list of suspicious individuals within their community because the Yorkshire Ripper had been killing people for a number of years, and there was heightened amount of paranoia and suspicion in communities at that time, and a lot of fear that women were experiencing because the serial killer was targeting women. So it follows her story and her journey, exploring her local neighborhood, but there are many more mysteries in this local neighborhood than just the identity of the serial killer, and you learn a lot about social imbalances at the time, and but it's also just a wonderful coming of age story and a story of friendship, and I adored it and was completely absorbed by it.
I think I've been a bit contrary when it comes to that book, because the publisher has really put a lot behind it.
Yeah, there's been a lot of promotion.
I feel like I keep being told to read it, and I resist that, which is, do you know, that's so contrary of me, especially as an author, because like when my publisher does a big marketing campaign, I'm extremely grateful, and then when other people, I'm like, Also, do you know what? I think that your description made me want to read it, because I think from just
Sorry, we continuously have a problem with coasters where I try to go take a sip of water and the coaster drops.
Spectacularly drops.
Sorry.
What was that book? The Trouble with Goats and Sheep?
Yeah, by Joanna Cannon.
I didn't like that book, and I think that I think my not enjoying that book just on the surface level, the kind of small sort of young people kind of exploring what their own, I worried it would be similar to that, and I didn't like it. So I'm being a bit contrary. Both of those are not necessarily good reasons to not read a book, but you know, sometimes when, as we discussed, when you have a lot of books, sometimes the smallest little weird prejudice or contrariness means that that's how you make a decision. But now I'm more inclined to read it. My next one is Enter Ghost by Isabel Hamad.
Oh, yeah.
Which I really want to read. It's about a Palestinian woman who goes back to Palestine after, I think she's had like a bad breakup. She's an actress, and she ends up involved in a production of Hamlet. It sounds good. And obviously it's set before anything that's happening currently. But I also, think I would like to see a Palestinian writer on the list as well. So the combo of all of those things, I really enjoy books that kind of I like that it has a play in it. I like kind of fiction that has that kind of meta level of novels about novels or plays or storytelling or language in some ways. So
I do too.
Yeah,
and I've been really wanting to read that as well, so I hope it's listed. My next choice is The Story of the Forest by Linda Grant.
Oh, no, I did contemplate this one. Authors who've been shortlisted in the last 10 years get a free pass, so they can get submitted anyway, and authors who've won can get a free pass for their new book as well. So like Linda's book will definitely have been in the mix, would have been read by somebody. But it, you know what, didn't particularly appeal to me when I read the blurb. So
Okay. It immediately appealed to me because it begins in Latvia, and I have Latvian heritage, and in the past, like I made a whole video of like going to Riga for the first time, and so I was drawn to reading it for that reason. And so it's about a girl in the early 20th century, and she encounters a group of politically minded men, and this kind of changes her perspective, and we follow her and her family over a period of time as they emigrate to the United Kingdom and settle here, and following their life, and so how sort of politics intersect with their lives over actually like an entire lifetime pretty much. Quite a few years. And I found it really engaging. I wasn't sure what I was going to make of it, but I got really into the story and found it really emotional and moving, and quite clever in how it was written.
My next pick is Loot by Tanya James. It's about like a family of craftspeople, I think. And I think it's set across lots of different countries and time periods, and it's about like a craft and family and colonialism. Do you know what? This is like a real vibes forward pick. It's one that I really want to read. I don't know much about it other than as soon as I read the blurb. It's got a great cover with like a tiger on the front. I think it's like about to come out, maybe, or just come out. An epic tale of plundered treasure, savage empire, lasting love, and a young man's dream to make his mark on the world, with a blurb by Maggie O'Farrell. A hero's quest, a love story, an exuberant heist novel that traces the legacy of colonialism across the world. I just think that sounds really good. So again, that's the one where I'm just like, I would like to read it.
My next pick is The Vaster Wilds by Lauren Groff.
So this is on my another sheet, my honourable mentions, because these are the 4 books actually that I really were a wrench. You know what? It's just one of those ones I didn't get on well with Fates and Furies.
Oh, okay.
But I loved Matrix. I will probably read this because I liked Matrix so much. But you know what? It's just one of those ones where my vibe was, I don't think I'll pick it, but rooted in literally nothing. So you should probably tell us about it.
Well, I mean, she's been listed for the prize before. She's such like a high-profile author. It seems quite likely it'll be picked. But also, I read this with my online book club. We had such great discussions about it. I think I enjoyed it more than Matrix, even though I was the fan of Matrix. I was also a fan of Fates and Furies, although that's a very different style of book.
I didn't dislike
subject
that book.
Matter.
I didn't love it. Like it just, I was like, yeah, it's good. She's a good. I didn't get my heart, you know.
Right. Yeah.
I appreciated it, but I didn't like fall for it as a reader.
I think why I would prefer this book is more like structurally in how it takes place over a compressed amount of time, like a certain number of days, whereas in Matrix you get like an entire lifetime, and so there's great big gaps that are left out, like necessarily because it's like skipping ahead in time, forward in time. And so I found that slightly jarring in Matrix, even though I loved the story and the characters and the situation and what she was saying in that story, but also how this just it's such a moving story, really emotional, but also so wonderful how she creates the natural environment that this young girl on the run a few centuries ago in America in a colony. She's run away from a colony. You know, she's committed a crime, and it takes there's a whole mystery of what she actually did and the possible consequences of that. And you follow her as she's trying to survive out in the wilderness and trying to make it to a French colony to hopefully find sanctuary and a new life for herself. And one of my favorite scenes in this book is it recalls a memory of when she traveled over by sea to America, and that voyage is just so wonderfully written. I mean, it's absolutely terrifying, as you imagine like a journey like that would be across the ocean at that time, but it's so well written. It's such a powerful scene. There's just a lot to love about this book, but also larger themes about like early America and the vulnerability of women.
Okay, I'd be very happy to be wrong, and because I'd like to read it. It's definitely one I'm keen to read. Okay, my next one is Soldier Sailor by Claire Kilroy, which I'm honestly not sure I want to read. A bit sounds like it's quite intense. I read a review that was basically like, if you're a mother or you're thinking about it, this will horrify you because it's a book-long panic attack. So,
but I also read some other reviews that said it was like very funny as well, which I kind of, given the subject matter of it's about a new mother and
have
struggling
you read it?
with. I haven't, no, but I've been wanting to. So
it's like it's a mother talking. So it's a mother talking to her newborn, who so the mother is is soldier and the child is sailor, and I've just heard that it's exceptionally good. So that's why I picked it.
And it's one I've been really meaning to read, in just one of those books that I was just like, I don't know why I haven't got to it
It's
yet.
another short one as well, isn't it?
Biography of X by Catherine Lacey.
Oh no, do you know what? I haven't even come across this. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, this was published last summer. It was one of my favorite books that was published last year. It's so inventive and clever in what it does. It's a woman writing about the story of her deceased wife, who was a radical artist, but it also has an alternative history to it in America, and so you gradually learn about the way that it's a slightly different slant on how America could have gone.
Okay.
And how it explores the politics of that is really interesting, but also it intersperses into the story some real historical figures
Okay.
and how they play into it.
Great.
It's really fun. So it's very enjoyable of picking that out. But it's I think it's just such a great book.
Great.
And it's a book that I think is worthy of more attention.
Okay.
And so it feels like a book that like the Women's Prize could really like get behind and champion.
Yeah.
And,
awesome.
so,
I mean, you've sold it to me. I love kind of alternate histories and real historical figures cropping up.
Yeah, just lots in it
novels.
about like queerness and art and So
awesome. Sounds great.
It's really good.
My next one is Dominoes by Phoebe McIntosh, which is another one that's just about to come out. And again, this is just one that I think sounds really good and want to read. It's about a woman starts dating, it's a black woman who starts dating a white man, and they have the same surname, and they're like, oh, how cute. And then I believe like she then discovers that his descendants owned slaves who were his descendants is the wrong way around. What? Ancestors.
Yeah.
And who were her ancestors, and like how that then, like what do you do with that as a couple? And I just think that's such an interesting, clever, tangly premise for a book and a sort of love story that I just think that sounds like I just want to read it. So
and I've not heard of that. So
I think it's about to come out.
Sounds
It comes out in March, I think.
My next.
We're not doing a lot of matches, are we?
No, yeah. That's kind of surprising.
Yeah.
Have you heard of this? River East, River West by Aube Ray Lescure, which is a novel I just finished reading a few days ago.
No, I haven't heard of that one.
Okay, it's a debut novel. So it's a dual timeline, dual narrative of begins in 2007 in Shanghai of a 14-year-old girl whose mother is white and American, but her father is Chinese, and she's never known her father and doesn't know who her father is. But at the very beginning of the novel, her mother is marrying a Chinese man in Shanghai who she does not approve of.
Okay.
And so there's that emotional element to it, and we follow her as she's very she really wants to move to America. She's really drawn to the West, but then we also get the story of her Chinese stepfather beginning in the 80s and following him and his development and how then their lives gradually intersect. And it's so well written and really surprising where the story goes, and but so it's also like a great coming of age tale, but also so like fascinating about the history of this region and China. So it sort of follows through the economic boom in China and these like tensions between East versus West, and especially like Western communities in Shanghai and the Far East, and the racial elements at play, and especially her as someone of mixed heritage, how she sort of reconciles her sense of identity. And it's really, really good.
Awesome. Because my next book is Chrysalis by Anna Metcalf.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Which I don't know, it's not that I don't want to read it. It's just I feel like it's one of those books that is entirely like down to voice and execution, because this is about like an influencer. Have you read it?
I have not, no, but I've been really wanting to.
It's about a woman who becomes an influencer, but a kind of extreme, like she moves to the countryside and she does videos where it's like really difficult to hold yoga poses for an hour, but it's told through three people who know her. Isn't it like her? Yeah,
you don't get her perspective.
Her mother, her housemate, and an ex or a partner. It's a man who knows her. And I think that's a really clever concept. And I think my hesitancy to read is just in terms of, anything to do with kind of social media and influencers. I think it's hard to do it in an interesting way. There's almost like a snobbery around people who kind of assuming that people who are influencers are kind of vapid.
Yeah, it's usually quite dismissive.
And I don't know that that's an interesting... It's not interesting to me to sort of just read a very kind of biting, intellectually snobby satire about women who are influencers. That's just not something that's interesting to me. But this sounds like it potentially is a bit more nuanced, and ideas around perception and like being perceived and community and isolation, which I'm interested in. But that's why it's one where I'd want to read like the first 50 pages, because I think it's all about tone and voice, isn't it, for something like this? It's like those kind of, I feel like it's a cousin to the kind of Disaster Millennial Woman book, the kind of influencer book. And some of those I've loved, but I'm on the whole now wary of that.
And I have a fun anecdote in that I went to a literature event last year before Chrysalis was published, and met the author and was chatting to her, and she was talking about the book, and so at one point I was like, were you influenced by The Vegetarian by Han Can? Which uses a similar structure of talking about a woman's life, but showing different perspectives on her from people she knows well, but you never get her direct perspective. And she was like, yeah, of course. Okay. So it's like, okay, good. Glad I could identify that.
Oh, that's fun, because I like that book a lot.
So yeah, I think it's highly likely, if you are a fan of The Vegetarian, as many people are, that you'll probably get along with this. And it definitely made me want to read it, although I haven't read it yet.
Okay.
But yeah, would love the excuse to finally get to it. My next choice is Western Lane by Chetna Maroo.
No, I this was another one I like had on my kind of long list, because obviously it's on the Booker shortlist. Do you know what? I can't make myself want to read a book about squash.
Honestly, it's so good though.
Do you know what? It's one of those ones that I'm sure if I had a reason to read it, that would be by the by. But again, it's that thing of choosing what to read, and like I just am not drawn. You know, the headshots, why it felt like a wild card for me, because it's a sports book. I really struggle to work up any desire to read any books about sport, and I know that that's ridiculous, and you know, that's the sport is often the vehicle, it's not, you know, I know it's not like a handbook about squash, but it's so off-putting to me that it's about squash.
And I felt exactly the same last year when, and so have been wanting to read it because I had heard good things. And then when it was on the Booker long list, it was one of the first books I read. And I was like, I love this.
Okay.
I really got into it. And it was one of my favorite books that I read last year. And, but the way, sport is a very like central feature of it. It's about an adolescent girl who wants to enter a regional squash tournament, but also she had recently lost her mother, and so it's very much about grief.
Okay.
And
sorry, I feel bad
her
for
family. Her family not talking about a lot of the emotional things surrounding all of this, and how that like interplays with her like concentration and focus, and being in this like a glass cube for hours on end, repetitively doing this sport, and how that plays into her emotional state and her like formation of an identity, because she's an adolescent, so she's coming of age, but also wrestling with this heavy thing of her mother's recent passing. So
I would get rid of my resistance quickly if it was on the list, but I think
and it's quite short, so it wouldn't take
she
you
also
that long
seemed
to
lovely
read.
at the Booker dinner. So
absolutely, she came up and said hello to me, and I'm like, thank you for
nice.
supporting the book. And she was just she was wonderful.
Okay, I will get over my squash barrier. My next choice is Julia by Sandra Newman. Hey, I thought this might be a match.
Yep. There we go.
Great, okay. Which I haven't read yet.
So I did read this last year, and it's, as I mentioned earlier, rereading 1984. Last year I reread that in preparation for reading this.
Great.
And part of the pleasure of reading 1984, while there are so many great things about it, part of the pleasure of it was the anticipation of getting to this book and knowing that I would get Julia's perspective, because there are some aspects in 1984 that I was like, I can't wait for this main character to be skewered a bit and interrogated and get a different point of view, because there are some aspects of his character which are so nasty and horrible, and his interactions with Julia, and how there's so much room for Julia's perspective, which we don't get in the novel, which is fair in a way, because it's all through his point of view, and so it's necessarily limited in that way. But really enjoyed how Sandra Newman explored this story from a very different angle and gave a very different perspective on the politics of it, but also the interpersonal relationships and developing Julia's character in such a fascinating way, and where she goes with her story much further than where George Orwell takes it in exploring the dynamic of this dystopian society. And I found it absolutely
I'm excited.
fascinating.
You know, I intend to reread 1984, but I'm really aware that last year what really derailed my Women's Prize Longlist reading was deciding to read David Copperfield before Demon Copperhead. But like, 1984 is a much shorter book, and also I've read it before, whereas I hadn't read David Copperfield before. So it's both very long and also new to me. So I'm hoping I could do a reread of 1984 with a little more efficiency, but that really did scupper I never quite got it back from spending a month reading the 1,000 pages
Just totally
of Dickens.
Understandable.
But then I was glad.
It was very worthwhile, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was annoying for you because I was like, I haven't read any of the books. But for my own selfish reading experience, I really, really was glad that I did it, both because I loved David Copperfield so much.
But yeah, it would be funny if there was another listing of basically a female author rewriting famous male authors.
Classic.
Classic.
Let's keep doing that.
Yeah,
I'd rather read more of those than another Greek mythology retelling.
Yeah, honestly. It's my pick next.
Yes.
Okay, so my next choice is Nightbloom by Peace Adzo Medie.
I've not come across this one.
Which I have not read. It's one of the only books that I've not read, but it just seems like a very likely choice. That there's a lot of love for this book. So her previous novel was on Reese Witherspoon's book club list. So this is about two female cousins in Ghana, following them from their adolescence, and that they're much closer than cousins. They're more like sisters and best friends, and have this very close connection with each other. But then we follow them through a number of years where they grow increasingly distant from each other. And so we follow their separate stories. And I think the narrative alternates between their points of view. And it just sounds very good. And a lot of readers I know have absolutely loved this book. And it's been one I've been wanting to read. So
Going for the Anna James strategy of picking books.
Yeah.
My next choice is A History of Burning by Yannicka Oza. This is kind of one of those family spanning lots of generations, I believe. Or no, maybe not generation, maybe generations, maybe just one family, but over a few decades, about an Indo-Ugandan family and just their life with the shifting political and military situation, and it just sounds very good. It's been well reviewed, and also I feel like the Women's Prize often does quite like those sort of tracing the political history of a country through a family. It feels, I don't know, it just feels like a kind of Women's Prize-y book. I mean, the logic for most of these are, it sounds good, other people like it, I want to read it, so I'll put it on my list.
My next pick is Tom Lake by Anne Patchett.
Yes.
Okay. Yay.
Great. Which I haven't read, but I love Anne Patchett, as do we all.
Yes, previous winner of the prize. She won for Bel Canto, didn't she? And and her fiction is just so good. And this has been, I would say a lot of people have loved this book. Although, before I went into reading it, I was slightly wary of it because I heard from a number of readers that were kind of disappointed by it. But I personally went into it and found that I just fell in love with the story. And I think also the mood of the story, because it's quite gentle in following a woman who is living a very happy life on a farm with her husband and her three daughters who are all in their 20s, and her daughters come back to live with her parents to help with the harvest, but also it's set over the pandemic, so they're kind of sheltering there. And the mother had a relationship early on in her life with an actor who went on to be a very famous actor. And so during this time of the pandemic, the daughters are very intrigued by the story and want to know more. And so it's her recalling this, and it's what she chooses to leave in and what she chooses to leave out of what she actually tells her family. But so we get pieces of her story and her becoming an adult, figuring her way out in the world. Also, there's a lot in it about acting in theater because she met him when she was a young actress, acting in a performance of Our Town, and it's about her her relationship with the character in this very famous American play. And and I just really adored this story. Even though it is like a very gentle story, I think there's like more in it that's like at stake than like emotionally than what is initially apparent.
Okay.
And also how there are revelations along the way that like it's not a very thickly plotted story, but there are some surprises along the way, both in what she reveals about her stories, but then what like her husband reveals and what like the daughters talk about like their own stories that she didn't initially realize either. And so I think it's really cleverly done.
My next one is my last cheat. So either The Centre by Aisha Manazil Siddiqui or
What?
The Extinction of Irina, I've written that wrong, Ray, by Jennifer Croft. Because basically these are both books about like translation and language, and I think it would be surprising if both of them were on the list, because I think they're kind of exploring similar things, but they both, honestly, these are two of the ones I will read both of these. So Jennifer Croft was on the shortlist for Home something.
On the Longlist last year,
which that one didn't really appeal to me at all. But this is about a group of translators who travelled to this kind of famous reclusive author's house to translate her like Magnus Opus. Is that what am I saying? Magnus Opus? Magnum Opus? You know what I mean.
Yeah.
Her masterpiece. And they go, and then there's like, they're all there at the same time, and then she takes them into like the jungle and then disappears. And they have to like wrestle with the work that she's left, but they're all from different countries and languages. And it's about how they perceive each other and her. And I just think that sounds really good and interesting and clever. But then The Centre is about a woman who is a translator who's like, has like a job that is low, like she's not happy with, like it's doing subtitles, it's like badly paid and she wants to do more. But her boyfriend, who's white, comes back one day and he can like suddenly fluently speak like her native tongue. And it turns out that he's been going to this place where like you go for like this 10-day intensive thing, and you'd come out knowing another language fluently. And it's about colonialism and access to language, and can you learn a language if you don't understand the culture and history of where that language has come from. So they're both about identity and language and kind of colonialism, and they both sound really interesting. They're very much both books that I'm drawn to. But I'm doing a bit of a cheat because I think they're exploring similar themes, and I wouldn't expect to see both of them. But then I couldn't decide, I'm sorry. Because Jennifer Croft's been listed before, but does that count again? Like, that doesn't really mean anything in particular other than because it's different judges every year.
Though I wouldn't entirely like discount both of them being listed,
you
because
never know.
Like on the International Booker Prize last year on the shortlist, there were two books, both about women who are struggling with issues of whether they wanted to be a mother or not, and lots of people thought surely they won't list both of these books because the subject matter is so similar, but they take very different approaches and have different
actually,
styles of writing. And
often themes do come out because judges are interested in things, and there's a few books that we've talked about that actually have themes to do with sort of that also kind of tie into that same thing around language. If I was ever a judge, can someone,
come on,
I would all be like, let's just have 16 books about language and stories and metafiction, and then I'd never get asked to judge a prize again.
My next choice, very famous book, author The Fraud by Zadie Smith.
I knew you'd choose this.
Yeah, it's her first historical novel about a famous trial in the mid-1800s about a question of identity and a man who was claiming to be heir to a fortune, but a lot of people didn't believe he was the actual man, and there was a whole famous court case surrounding that, but is told through the perspective of a Scottish woman who is following this trial, but is also the housekeeper / former lover / related through marriage to a historical novelist, and following his story, who he's like quite a popular writer and a contemporary of Dickens, but a lot of his contemporaries kind of looked down upon him, and he was a real historical novelist who's now not read anymore because Zadie Smith says he was a terrible writer and his books weren't actually that good, but his story is quite interesting, how she draws that into that book, but also how this case raises larger issues about the end of slavery in Jamaica, and the Scottish woman, she's an abolitionist, and so there's a lot going on in this novel, and it's really fascinating how it all comes together. And so when I was reading it, I was thinking like, well, there's quite a lot that's happening in this book, but it's one of those books that the more time that's gone by, the more I've like reflected about it and think about it, of our like understanding of history and how that is like specifically expressed and translated into fiction. And so like what when we include facts in novels, like what does that mean? And when we manipulate the truth for like artistic reasons, what does that mean? And it's really raises a lot of really interesting questions, as well as she's a really great character and really interesting and fun to read about. So
it's one I'm really looking forward to reading. One of my bookish confessions is that I love Zadie Smith's essays and nonfiction, but like I've never fallen for one of her novels. I've enjoyed,
and I know a lot of readers that say that.
I've enjoyed reading them. Like I liked NW a lot. I liked White Teeth. I liked On Beauty, which won the Women's Prize. Again, it's that thing of like I don't feel like I fell for any of them, but I do love historical fiction, and I do love, as we've been talking about, I am really drawn to what you would just talk about in terms of all of those sorts of knotty issues. So my next book is The Lagos Wife by Vanessa Walter.
Okay.
Which I just think looks really good. I think it's a bit more like, I don't think it's like a thriller, like a literary thriller, but sometimes one of those does pop up.
Yeah.
And I believe this is about a woman who is not very happy, and she moves to Lagos to become part of like a group of like expat wives, and then she vanishes, she disappears, and it's about like what happened to her and like what was really going on in her life, good and bad. I haven't read it, but I think it looks good. And I feel like, again, the Women's Prize has form for, I think, celebrating great Nigerian fiction. And I think that kind of literary thriller genre often pops up. Yeah,
and sort of because of that, of the more like thriller-ish element of it, it's like not a book that I would naturally immediately be drawn to, but I think it might be a book that if it is listed, I'll probably really enjoy reading, and that I'll look forward to reading, and because it's slightly outside of a book that I would immediately choose to read. My next choice is a novel that I just finished reading this morning, so it's very fresh in my mind, and it is Lublin by Manya Wilkinson. It is a novel which was just published very recently, like a week or two ago. It's about 3 adolescent Jewish boys in 1907 in Poland who are traveling from their hometown to a city because they want to sell brushes. And so it's kind of a road trip journey, but they're on foot traveling to this town, and we follow them, and their personalities, their very different and distinct personalities, emerge as they're walking and talking and sharing stories and telling jokes and getting into squabbles and fights, and it's a very unique book, and it becomes like almost increasingly like surreal. There's like an air of tension because there's awareness of Russian troops being nearby who are anti-Semitic, and their fear of this, and but it's also very charming, and like just how it evokes their personalities, but it's very funny too, because like one of the boys, he tells some like quite like bad jokes, and like the way that's received, and I always find that like quite humorous, and it's just like a very unique kind of story, very different kind of story than like any other I've read recently, and also it's published by and Other Stories, who are independent press, and it would be really great to see independent press highlighted in the list. And I just completely adored it and was found completely absorbed by it. It's a fairly short book too. It's like only 200 pages. It's very quick read and really absorbing, and like I said, just very unique.
You know, I do want to read The Fraud, but if I'm going to be having to read The Fraud on a time scale, I'm glad. I hope it's surrounded by short books. Yeah. My next choice is Let Us Descend by Jessamine Ward.
Okay.
Her new book, which this was one I kind of undenied about. She's been listed before. I don't know a great deal about this. It's about slavery. Apparently, it is quite a brutal, difficult read. It was an Oprah pick. And
I was like, I'm in an on whether to put that on my list or not. I've not read it. But I partly didn't read it because when it came out, I heard very mixed things.
Oh, interesting.
And so, it made me unsure whether I would enjoy, because there was a lot I appreciated about her novel that was listed for the Women's Prize previously. But actually what made me really fall for that book was when at a Women's Prize event, she read aloud from it, and Jessamine Ward read so well. It was such an emotional reading that I just got completely absorbed the story. And she also has a very poetic quality to her writing, which is just gorgeous to read, even though she writes about very serious subject matter. My next choice is The House of Broken Bricks by Fiona Williams.
That's another one I haven't come across.
It's a debut novel, which was published about a month ago by Faber. I really adored it. It's another book that's really beautifully written. It's a story of a family of a Black woman who is originally from London, who's married a white man, and they live in rural England on a farm. And they have twin sons, and the novel moves between their different perspectives. And their twin sons, one is very light-skinned, one is very dark-skinned. And as it moves between their different perspectives, there's a larger mystery about this novel, which is gradually uncovered, but it's not even so much about the twist, but about how different layers of the emotional state of this family are revealed over time. And I thought that was so well written, and there is a lot of elements of the story that are so atmospheric, and I just thought is just a beautiful, beautiful novel, and I'd love to see it get more attention, because I think it's a really great debut. So.
My penultimate pick is Stoneyard Devotional by Charlotte Wood. No way!
Match,
Oh, great! That's not an expected one. Well, I haven't read
surprise.
it, but I just
neither have I.
Oh,
but,
I just think
it's not been published yet. But.
Brilliant. It's about a woman who isn't religious, who, correct me if I'm getting this wrong, goes to, after a bad time, goes to stay at a convent, a nunnery, right, for a sort of retreat.
A religious community,
and it's about her experiences
in Australia.
There. And yes, and I'm really always interested in nuanced books about faith, as has been recorded over the years, and it sounds like that's what it is.
And I have to admit, part of why I picked this book, even though I haven't read it yet, I thought it sounded like a book that you would be really interested in. And so I wanted to put it on your radar in case, because...
you know me well. That's so funny. I like that.
And it'd be great to see, even though I haven't read it, I think it's published later in March. So that's part of the reason why I haven't read it yet, but I'm really looking forward to it. And I've not read anything by Charlotte Wood before, but a lot of booktubers I follow are massive fans of her work, and it'd be really great to see an Australian author on the list. So that was part of, that was a great,
nice
surprise.
So we both got one left.
Yeah, shall we do it at the same time? Or no?
Well, we can't. It would be very tonally unpleasant to say it at the same time.
It would. Okay.
Okay. We should reveal to each other at the same time. Then we can show you. Okay. 1, 2, 3.
London McAnally, yay! So, okay, so then it is an upper because we actually matched.
We would have said it at the same time, but imagine how unpleasant it would have been if we'd both said the same, different things at the same time.
It would.
Land of Milk and Honey by Steve Pam Zhang, which I have read.
You have read,
This is the one book that I picked that I've read. And I loved it. It's one of my favourite books I read last year.
And part of the reason why I finally got to reading it was because I knew that, you responded to it very positively. And so that kind of pushed me. I had been meaning to read it. And
you liked it?
And absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a big fan of it. It's a kind of really unique take on a dystopian/utopian story because it's like kind of...
It's a climate change book without being a climate change book almost. Like it is very much about that, but it...
Yeah, where the planet has been covered in smog that leads to a lot of crops dying and then widespread hunger, of course.
And so most people just have to kind of make do in this, but the very, very rich have retreated to the highest points where it's above the smog. And the book is about a chef, a broke chef, who is offered the opportunity to go and be the private chef for one of these communities high up in the hills. It's Italy, right? It's on the
on the Italian border.
And she goes there and finds this, utopian, but is it? Community where she has access to not just the food that she has lost, but like basically anything that she could want, the most obscure, bizarre, rare foods because
it's also partly a sanctuary where they're trying to preserve these things which would otherwise die out of species and plants and animals.
Great food writing, although not always pleasant food writing. But also there she meets the daughter of the kind of leader of the community, and they... I'm not sure. I was about to say fall in love. I'm not sure that's quite accurate, but they have a relationship it's about food and desire and power and the planet, and it's a curiously hopeful book for a sort of dystopia.
Yeah.
And I found it really interesting. I interviewed Pam for my podcast, and she was really interesting. And I read her debut, How Much of These Hills is Gold, finally, and I also thought that was excellent. I think it's just really well done. In a busy genre, it's a very fresh, unique take. I really don't feel like I've read a lot that's kind of similar.
Yeah, and the story itself like goes to an unexpected place.
Yes, it doesn't. You think you know what's going to happen to this kind of commune of rich people in a dystopia. You think you know where it's headed, but she really plays with that. But also she plays with the fact that she knows you're going to be expecting that, because she kind of builds up these beats of almost the kind of dread, and you're like, oh, but then she plays with it in a fun way that I think takes advantage, in a good way.
It's really well done, yeah. I really enjoyed it too.
Yeah, okay, great.
Do
you know what you didn't pick, which I wondered if you'd pick, was, because we talked about this author last time, was Yellowface, which I haven't read.
Oh, yes.
Have you read it?
I have not, and sort of chose not to when I sort of publicly asked whether I should read this book or not, and I got a lot of responses from people I've had a lot of interaction with, and said knowing your reading taste, I don't think you'll
it's not one I similarly asked people and got affirmation of my instinct, which was that Yellowface has much to recommend it, but is on the nose. I do actually think it might be there.
Yeah.
I think it's quite likely. If I was doing a strict predictions, taking my personal opinion out, I probably would have it on there.
I think you're right, yeah.
And actually, do you know what? We might both be proved completely wrong.
Yeah.
I often am
with
my absolute, just going on vibes and instinct. I'm very regularly proved wrong. Famously, when I decided I was going to hate Milkman, it turned out to be the best book I read that year. So I'm extremely open to being proved completely wrong, always, when it comes to books.
Although with last year's award, before the long list was even announced, I predicted what book would win. So
you did. You truly did. You should... you have a clip of you saying that, don't you?
I do, yeah.
You need to get that on the internet. You need to get your credit for that. Do you know what? I'm not sure I would go as far as saying that it's going to win, but I am reading The Ministry of Time at the moment, which is as good as everyone says it is. Scepter.
Who's that by?
Carl Bradley.
I don't know that book.
What? feel like everybody's talking
they're
about
like
it. I feel
so
like everyone in
uninformed.
publishing is fighting over proofs of it.
Oh gosh.
It's like it's about a ministry in government set like in the near future, and they take expats from history, so people who would have died, and try and assimilate them into modern life. And it's about colonialism and history, and you know what, it would fit really nicely with a lot of the books we're talking about this year. But it's very funny, it's very clever, it's quite sexy as well, and it might be a bit too genre-y, which I just want to, on the record, I think that's nonsense, and I think more genre books for prizes, literary prizes, but I hope that it certainly gets, I think it's going to do very well this year. It comes out in May.
Okay. Oh, so it wouldn't be eligible for this year's prize?
Oh, no. It would 100% have been on my list if it was. It'd be next year.
Okay. And I don't think I'll be as bold as to like make a prediction this early on about what would actually win. Although like partly just because I only just read it, but I would like love if Lublin won or did very well in this prize, because as like a contrast to last year of a novel which won, which was already like very well received and widely read, it'd be great to have a novel that I've not heard anybody else speak about, that if that was like catapulted into public attention.
That would be great, wouldn't it? Although the ones we've got in common, so there's some big hitters in the mix, aren't there?
Yeah.
So we've got Enright, Anne Patchett, Zadie Smith. Like Sandra Newman is not that, but a very established writer. So we actually ended up with 6 in common, which is actually, I think, perhaps more, and some, big hitters. So it'd be nice to see if these are right, them included with some of the smaller publishers or books that haven't really been getting any buzz yet. But we shall see. I'm excited, but I always am. And you know what? The long list will come out and it'll be books that I'm just like, but you know what? It's not really a surprise if we don't virulently take against at least one book on the list, you know?
Yeah,
part
absolutely.
of it.
And there are always surprises.
Always surprises, yeah.
All these books I've not heard of.
Part of the fun.
Always some books I read like, how have I not heard of this before? And then other books I read like, what? This was listed?
Yes. And sometimes we align on those books and sometimes we don't, which is, all part of it. I have good intentions. I do have to write 2 books over the same period as the Women's Prize. So we shall see how those good intentions pan out. But I certainly don't have to read a massive Dickens book in advance, so that will help me. And also I just moved house, so honestly most of my books are in boxes. I will probably only have access to the Women's Prize long list, so that will help me too.
Well, let us know in the comments below what you think of our choices, if there are any that you are also expecting or hoping to see on the list, or if you have any other choices that you want to let us know about, because I'd love to hear about other people's picks for what they're hoping to see on the official long list, which will be announced on March 5th. And the shortlist will be announced later in April and then in mid-June. The winner of both the fiction and the non-fiction award will be announced at the same time at the ceremony. But it'll be very exciting to see, and we'll have lots and lots of choices of things to read.
We will.
Thank you for watching us discuss these choices. We're looking forward to having more conversations about this year's Women's Prize, both for fiction and non-fiction. But hope you're doing well and reading good things. And
we'll be back soon.
We'll be back soon. Bye-bye. Bye. Gosh, how long? Okay.